It is my pleasure today to introduce one of our most successful entrepreneurial alums, Dr. Vlad Coric. Dr. Coric is a member of our advisory council, and I asked him to join today to share his successes and key learnings as the founder of Biohaven, a neuroscience pharmaceutical company that was recently acquired in part by Pfizer for $13 billion for their drug Nurtec ODT. Let's take a look at his amazing entrepreneurial journey.
Dr. Vlad Coric graduated from the Wake Forest University School of Medicine to pursue innovative neuroscience research with a goal to uncover new ways to treat debilitating neurological and neuropsychiatric diseases. After completing his internship at Yale New Haven Hospital in 2001, Dr. Coric joined the faculty at Yale School, serving as an associate clinical professor and head of the Yale Clinical Neuroscience Research Unit. Eager to directly advance new drugs in neuroscience, Dr. Coric moved from academia to the pharmaceutical industry, joining Bristol Myers Squibb, where he would become Group Director of Clinical Research with a focus on leading drug development programs across therapeutic areas. When Big Pharma abruptly abandoned the high-risk field of neuroscience drug development, Dr. Coric turned this catastrophic event into an opportunity to form his own modern pharmaceutical company, Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. With a groundbreaking migraine investigational drug serving as the catalyst, Dr. Coric builds Biohaven's team and gains the financing to rapidly fund the drug's development, taking Biohaven public in 2017. Harnessing a unique culture of innovation that Dr. Coric instilled at Biohaven, he rapidly led the company to its first FDA approval for Nurtec ODT, a transformative migraine medicine with blockbuster potential. Dr. Coric steered Biohaven through the headwinds of COVID-19 and propelled Nurtec ODT past its large pharma competitor AbbVie, ultimately becoming the #1 prescribed migraine treatment in its class. Recognizing the extraordinary value Dr. Coric built at Biohaven, the global pharmaceutical giant Pfizer acquired Nurtec ODT and Biohaven's CGRP franchise for a total of $13 billion in total financial considerations. Dr. Coric also structured a unique transaction that would enable Biohaven to spin out from the acquisition under the same name with $258 million in the bank and the majority of its team in place, ready to tackle new challenges in neuroscience.
Out with the old Biohaven, in with the new Biohaven. Earlier this year, the drug company agreed to do something bold, selling their key CGRP franchise, including the incredibly great migraine treatment known as Nurtec ODT. Dr. George, well, congratulations, and of course, welcome back to Denmark.
Thanks a lot, Jim. It's great to be here. And I remember back to 3 years ago when I was on your show, and you predicted it. You knew that Nurtec ODT was going to be one of the most important therapies for patients, and our team delivered, and we've changed the lives of patients with migraine. Thank you for that, and thank you for your spokesman.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you for inventing it. Today was typical. I knew it was going to rain. The rules say I can pop a Nurtec. I would be debilitated during the show. I would certainly be able to have a cognition, but concentration be impacted. And because of your drug, it's not.
Please join me in giving a warm Wake Forest welcome back to one of our best entrepreneurs and the keynote speaker at Entrepalooza 2023, Dr. Vlad Coric.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, and what an honor to be here today. Wake is such a very special place for me and my family. I graduated from medical school here. I met my wife here, who's also an alumni. We were married at Grayland, and my daughter Christina is enjoying her junior year here at Wake. So in many ways, Wake is home, and I feel like I'm home today. So thank you to Professor Dan Cohen and the Wake Forest Center for Entrepreneurship for inviting me today to talk. I am so excited to be part of Entrepalooza. Entrepalooza is a celebration of entrepreneurship. But what is entrepreneurship? I think entrepreneurship can be described in 2 words: catastrophe and opportunity. Now, when I say catastrophe, I mean everything from plain trouble in our lives to small problems, difficulties, challenges, and crises. But whether these challenges are small or large, they are all opportunities for us. The opportunity to create positive change, the opportunity to innovate, to expand markets, to create new ones and new structures like companies, and to better lives, pro humanitate. As entrepreneurs, you must keep in mind that catastrophe is always lurking, close by, and it wants to disrupt your boldest ideas and derail your most brilliant strategies. What's required of you, the entrepreneur, is both alertness and optimism. You need to be alert so that you can see the opportunity, and without optimism, you can't take advantage of the opportunity. You must be hardwired and learn to become hardwired to see all the potential rewards of opportunity, outweighing all the risks and unknowns that face you as entrepreneurs. So today, I hope to give you a front row seat at my story about Biohaven, a story of entrepreneurship, and I want to walk you through that journey and the company I created. It's a story of opportunities that emerged from a number of different challenges and catastrophes. Now, when Professor Cohen asked me to speak today, he said, "Come talk to the students about how you started your company and sold it." Well, it sounded like a straightforward plan and talk, right? But the truth is, I never set out to start my own company. I never took a business class. I didn't know anything about raising money. And in fact, I had never sold anything in my life, never mind something of such great value as Biohaven. But today, I can tell you that I was always guided by optimism, and I learned so much, and I'm excited to share that with you this afternoon. So Bill Parcells once said, "You are what your record says you are." A good place to start the Biohaven story is to go over the trusty Wall Street stock chart. On Wall Street, you are what your stock chart says you are. Like many companies, our story started, you see all the way in the left-hand corner, 61 cents a share, a handful of employees, a few $1,000s of initial investment, and then a few years later, we were fortunate enough to go public on the New York Stock Exchange at $17 a share, and we grew every single year over 50% year over year until the sale to Pfizer in October of 2022. Now that's Biohaven told from the 10,000-foot level. So if you look at that line, that's what a lot of investors look at. Look at that straight line up. But as entrepreneurs in the audience, you know that success doesn't come so easily, and there's a lot more complexity. I want you to drill down to see the jagged edges of that stock chart. Almost looks like an EKG to me in VFib. So much volatility, and that's where you'll see the real journey. Those jagged edges, I remember every one of those, the ups and downs, the roller coaster, and that's where you'll see the true tempest of the journey. So as we move on in talking about some of the risks that were ahead of us, starting a new company in any established industry has immense challenges, and there's crazy odds against success. But it's especially treacherous in biotech, where most new companies will fail because great scientific innovations don't translate always to human beings. And take a look at this chart. There's fewer than 3% of all startups will ever become public. Less than 1% will achieve that unicorn status of $1 billion in future valuation. 92% of all drugs will fail at some time in their clinical development. And over 90% of startups will fail within 4 years. Think about the odds against startup biotech companies. According to these metrics, Biohaven's demise was supposed to occur just when my children would be old enough to need hefty support from me for a college education, graduate school, and the like. The odds were certainly against us. But as I share more of my personal motivations, optimisms, and value, I hope that you'll see and better understand how Biohaven beat the odds. Now, remember what I said earlier. I knew nothing about the business world. I trained as a physician. My world was science, medicine, and taking care of patients. It wasn't one of spreadsheets, business plans, and investor calls. So what compels an entrepreneur who knows nothing about business to try to build a company despite all the risks and obstacles we just went over? Well, I think that everyone in the audience knows that passion is what fuels entrepreneurs. You saw a lot of that passion on the stage today from the student entrepreneurs. My passion was neuroscience, and it was there from a very young age, and it is really what drove me to create Biohaven. I grew up on the grounds of a large psychiatric state hospital where my parents worked. My parents were immigrants. They fled communism in the 1950s. So you might say my parents' catastrophe was communism that was strangling Europe, and their opportunity was America. And they had the optimism to risk that journey. To say the least, growing up on the grounds of a mental health hospital was a unique experience. I interacted with patients, and I firsthand witnessed the impact of severe mental illness, and I developed a curiosity about these disorders. I did not feel the stigma that many people have towards mental illness because I knew the patients by their first names, interacted with them, and their human story. But I was interested in learning more about their medical condition, and that it was no different than any other common disease out there. As I saw their suffering, my desire to pursue more knowledge about neuroscience grew into a passion, and that's what brought me to Winston-Salem and Wake Forest for medical school. So some 20 years ago, I was right here at Wake, about to graduate. It was probably a little more than 20 years ago from medical school. And like you, I was thinking about my own challenges and opportunities at that juncture of my life. I then went to Yale for my residency and stayed on to run an inpatient neuroscience unit there. However, it hit me, the reality was that our treatments for brain disorders had not changed over my entire life, over my entire training as well. There was no way to alter the devastating course of many illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar, migraine, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other brain disorders. At Yale, I realized that universities are not development companies. Universities do uncover truths, but they usually don't take those truths to market. So this is when I reached an inflection point in my own career, and I knew I needed to get closer to the front lines of drug development if I really wanted to change things for patients. I needed to become part businessman, a hat I never intended to wear. Now, with that bold mission, I joined the pharmaceutical industry. I want you to take a close look at these headlines because shortly after I joined, look what happened. Almost all of large pharma decided brain research was too difficult. The entire industry decided to exit neuroscience. Look at this. Pfizer and Bristol-Myers Squibb and AstraZeneca, one by one, our largest American pharmaceutical companies decided neuroscience was too risky and they exited. Think about that. I just left my academic career to go into the big pharma industry to bring new drugs to patients, and the industry was falling apart in neuroscience. Most of these companies had invested billions of dollars in new drugs in neurology, especially drugs that might treat Alzheimer's disease. Unfortunately, the trials were very disappointing and failed. So from a powerful juggernaut, neuroscience went from being kind of a shipwreck that you steer away from in the pharma industry. I want you to look at this slide to put the crisis in a little perspective in case you think I was exaggerating a little bit. On the left is a neuroscience facility I worked in at Bristol-Myers Squibb. And when I say they exited neuroscience, they destroyed the building. They knocked it down. They were out of neuroscience, okay, to put in perspective. So although this was an industry's catastrophe, this ultimately was going to become my opportunity. Like most first responders in medical school, they teach you to react to a crisis by running towards it, despite all of your emotions saying go in the opposite direction. I think entrepreneurs possess the same characteristics of running towards problems that need solving. As the pharma crisis in neuroscience was unfolding, my opportunity in entrepreneurship was just crystallizing. Many of the brightest neuroscience researchers who dedicated their entire lives were now marooned watching the boat go down. There were no other big pharma jobs for them to get. There was no one else who was going to rescue their careers. I was one of the lucky few. I was put on a lifeboat and sent to a different part of the company to retrain and do research in another area. While most of big pharma was beginning to view that neuroscience was really a catastrophe to run away from, I was alert to the opportunity. This was the time to go into neuroscience. I was convinced big pharma was wrong. They had to be wrong about leaving neuroscience. There's too many patients who suffer from bad neurologic and psychiatric disorders. The future would be bleak if we didn't do something about it. So this, in my eyes, it was the right time, and we had to run towards the opportunity here. So with a few months' salary, 4 kids at home, aged 6 to 12, and 2 sets of student loans, my wife and I both went to med school, so we had some hefty loans. I quit my stable job in big pharma to focus on trying to develop new treatments for brain disorders and founded Biohaven, and the focus was going to be neuroscience. So you might be thinking, what's it really like during those early days of a startup? Well, suffice to say that despite our bold vision and all our optimism, right, Biohaven had a challenge coming out of the gate. We needed to build a pipeline and convince investors it was a good idea. Our first drug that we licensed came from Yale and my academic work there, but we needed other drugs. It's too risky in neuroscience. You have to have a robust pipeline. But since most of pharma left neuroscience, we actually thought it would be a perfect opportunity to approach some large pharma companies and try to get some of those drugs into Biohaven. So we approached one big pharma company about licensing a migraine drug. They didn't think it was worth development. We actually thought this drug could change the paradigm in migraine. And we were able to license this for a small upfront and a promise to pay some future royalties. The company we licensed this from had spent hundreds of millions of dollars in its development. Talk about exploiting an opportunity. We got a good deal on this asset. We thought that this drug, freed up from the neuroscience shipwreck, might just become the basis of our first drug, and we eventually named it Nurtec ODT. You probably saw some commercials for it. We licensed additional drugs from other companies that had also exited neuroscience, and then most importantly, we added a top team of neuroscience researchers who were all laid off. So this startup had some of the most talented, best people in neuroscience coming into it. We all had a shared passion for neuroscience and our mission to help others. So excited about our new drugs and our team, we thought we had everything needed for our startup, except one thing: capital. Our plan made perfect, rational sense. We needed new treatments. Everyone knew that for mental health and neurologic disorders. Surely investors would embrace this great idea, right? Well, not so fast. Let me interject a lesson right here. Don't start a company if you don't have thick skin. Get used to hearing the word no, and that what you are trying to accomplish is impossible, especially from the investment community. With Biohaven, the first 200 investors we approached turned us down. They all said no. Investors thought this startup idea was just plain crazy. Fresh in their memory were the billions lost in Alzheimer's disease drugs, and they reminded us, big pharma abandoned neuroscience because it's a graveyard. You're going to do what, they asked? Bio who, they questioned? If big pharma went running for the hills, how could a small startup find success in neuroscience? Adding to their concern was I was a doctor, not an MBA with practice in this kind of business. Even just getting an audience was tough with investors. One investor had the audacity to tell me it wasn't even worth a formal meeting, but they had a plane ride through Connecticut, and if I went up to the local airport between the legs of their journey, he'd give me 30 minutes between his 2 flights. Of course, I humbly went to that airport, and wouldn't you know, investor 201 said yes and invested $3 million into the company. Despite the skepticism that surrounded us, we kept our optimism and advanced. By the way, that $3 million investment turned into $300 million for that investor. Not a bad return. So ever hear in business the expression cash is king? In developing drugs, that goes from a catchphrase to a guiding principle. Drug development is one of the most cash-intensive businesses that there is. The high cost of running clinical trials. Biohaven's initial funds were quickly depleted, running our initial trials, but the asset was actually progressing nicely. Our data was starting to come in, and we were confident that our migraine drug, Nurtec OTT, was going to be a game changer for patients. But we desperately needed more money to help fund the additional clinical trials. Entrepreneurs need to be bold, but also weigh the risks of each decision. We had such conviction that our preliminary data looked good that we thought and estimated there would be a 90% chance that we were going to win in our first phase 3 clinical trial. We decided to take a very bold move. We decided to approach the company that we licensed that drug from, and we offered to buy back our future royalty rights that we would owe them for $50 million, okay? And if we were right, we'd see a return on that positive study. And if we were wrong, we'd lose that $50 million. We would look pretty foolish if somebody thought that we paid $50 million for a drug that didn't work. Of course, the company was out of neuroscience, and they thought it was too risky, so guess what? They jumped at that offer. They took our $50 million, and then we waited for the study results. I have to say, I didn't sleep for weeks, literally weeks, between that point we paid the $50 million and waiting for the final study results. Thankfully, the study was positive. The value went up, and we sold that royalty to another royalty buying company for $150 million. So we translated the $50 million we paid to that company and sold it to $150 to another company. So we made $100 million in profit in 60 days. That was a vital piece of cash that we needed to continue to advance Biohaven. So the lesson here is to look for bold opportunities, especially when the odds are in your favor. So moving from startup is very complex and expensive and challenging, and going to IPO. And our hurdle was even greater because of the neuroscience field and how investors viewed it. So our road to the IPO was even more difficult. Remember, all of this was new to me. I never took a business class during college, never went to business school. I had to adapt and redefine myself and learn new things. I learned about roadshows, meetings with investors, how to build a book. I even know what a green shoe is now. Biohaven went public at $17 a share, March 2017. It was a fun day that day. I remember ringing the bell, but Wall Street didn't exactly welcome us with open arms. Take a look at this slide. We had to navigate the craziness of investors actually betting against us. It happens to a lot of companies when you're public in the form of short selling of your stock. People make a market in betting against you. So they want to destroy you so they can succeed. Crazy concept. We were shorted, and there were news stories that unfairly disparaged Biohaven. It's hard to forget this Bloomberg report, published under the headline, Biohaven's IPO Roadshow, Fantasy Meets Grimmer Reality. My wife called me that day. Is it really that grim? Is that supposed to be you with a unicorn head jumping off a cliff? I said, I hope not. So while we were trying to get our footing as a new company, another challenge came up. I thought all of these large, big pharma companies were supposed to be out of neuroscience. Well, all of a sudden, AbbVie, only the biggest big pharma out there, decided they were going to buy a competitor of ours. So all of a sudden, small Biohaven had AbbVie as our main competitor. So the picture now was changing to a David and Goliath contest. Here we were, small Biohaven, just a few employees, enough funds to last a few months, now against the Goliath of AbbVie. To put in perspective, AbbVie has 50,000 employees, $50 billion in annual revenue, and their market cap is $250 billion. With all its resources, their drug was now projected to be 18 months ahead of us. Wall Street expected they would crush us. The Goliath stirred. In fact, you see this slide here? AbbVie made it clear they're coming after us. They rented a billboard truck and parked it in front of our building in New Haven, Connecticut that said, "Game on." for all of our employees to see. I'd lie if it didn't feel somewhat intimidating. But you know what's the most important? We needed those 2 parking spots that they took up for 2 days. So there are many lessons we can learn from the biblical David versus Goliath paradigm. First, there can be an advantage to being the underdog. No one expects you to win, and being underestimated presents an opportunity to outmaneuver an overly confident opponent. The second lesson is that a worthy competitor only makes you stronger. We all tend to practice more, work out more, prepare more when there's a formidable task at hand. So in a way, that billboard and provocation from AbbVie was good. It reminded us of what we were up against, a large organization with almost unlimited resources, but bureaucratic and slow, and thankfully they were underestimating us. They were more focused on trying to intimidate us than actually being better than us. We decided we'd leave no stone unturned in trying to beat them in our preparation. We were going to do everything possible to beat them in our clinical trials and the commercial market. Winning would be our response to their billboard. As entrepreneurs, competing against a larger entrenched competitor is something you all might come up against in the future. My advice to you is, where they are comfortable and stayed, make your company agile, innovative, and bold. Remember, it's 2023. Use technology. Position your company to be modern and dynamic. Incorporate the latest technologies that you can and pay attention to efficiencies that will give you an advantage against a larger competitor. Remember, you don't fight a ground war against a larger competitor by putting a large army up against them. You have to find a novel, disruptive way to beat your competitor in those situations. That's exactly what we did. We built a small, efficient business structure without the hierarchy of pharma. We had to be smarter and quicker. Faster decision-making would be key to our advantage to trying to beat them. We had a decentralized structure, small teams, and high performers. And this created an environment and a culture that empowered our employees and allowed innovation to flourish. A common saying at Biohaven was, leave your title at the door and let's help each other win. The team mentality was critical to our success. Well, with our efficient approach, we moved quicker at our clinical trials, and we actually outperformed them. We did our trials in half the time it took them to do their trials. Their lead shrunk from 18 months down to 8 months, which was impressive, but still too large of a lead. Imagine if they were in the market 8 months ahead of us. We had to do something else, or they would crush us. So as an entrepreneur, one of the most important things that you can learn to do is to take risks. However, risk-taking really has to be balanced by a reasonable probability of success. This is especially true in high-stakes scenarios like the one we were facing with AbbVie in trying to erase their lead. There was only one strategy left that we could even think of to get rid of the remaining lead. In the pharma industry, it's these 3 letters up here, PRV. PRV stands for Priority Review Voucher. The PRV is like a fast pass at the amusement park. It allows you to skip the line at the FDA and get your drug approved 6 months faster. But there's one catch. PRVs are expensive, and purchasing them would be a big, big risk. They cost over $100 million, and you have to bid on them. And there's another important detail. If you don't get FDA approval, or you even mess up the paperwork and your approval gets delayed, you don't get your $100 million back. So for Biohaven and our small company, that could mean disaster if we miscalculated. We could not waste $100 million. Since AbbVie was way ahead of us, they probably decided, you know what, they didn't need to spend the money on a fast pass. Maybe it wasn't even on the radar, but surely the AbbVie team never thought a small startup like ours would be crazy enough to buy a $100 million PRV. Who would do that in their right mind? Well, I guess they underestimated us because we went to investors, we pitched the idea to them, and we bought that fast pass for $105 million, and we received accelerated approval from the FDA. This bold move made up the gap in AbbVie's lead, and we were now ready to launch at the same time they would be, and we had a good plan to try to beat them in the marketplace. So I hope I gave you a sense of a lot of the challenges we overcame, but with all the best plans and efficient execution, do you know what happened next? Remember our friend Catastrophe? We just paid $105 million for an accelerated approval from the FDA. And we actually hired 800 sales reps to go launch a new drug. Wouldn't you know it, FDA approval comes March 2020. And you all know what happened. It's on the slide. The beast of catastrophe once again rears its head. This time it was a real global catastrophe, and it threatened not only people, but also threatened to wipe out our company. After all those years of research, over $3 billion in money that we raised over the years to bring this drug to patient, COVID-19 was forcing the world to shut down, just as we were ready to launch our drug. Well, in this slide, you'll see that once again, Big Pharma wasn't going to help guide us. Actually, most Big Pharma immediately announced they were going to delay all their new drug launches. The stock market crashed. Biotechs went down because small companies that wouldn't have revenue streams, they wouldn't be able to weather the storm of COVID. This was another critical inflection point for Biohaven, and the path that we took would determine our fate yet again. Should we postpone the launch of Nurtec due to COVID? Delaying the launch a year would drive investors to jump overboard. Our neuroscience voyage would be over and might never recover. The company might go bankrupt. I couldn't for the life of me understand why Big Pharma was announcing they were delaying drug launches and delaying clinical trials. Amazon was still delivering packages to my house. The pharma industry is critical to the drug supply chain. If Amazon employees could do their job and deliver things to all of our homes, why shouldn't we be able to launch a new drug? I was really surprised by this, and even some major investors and some board members reached out and they suggested thinking about delaying the launch. But our team knew we could safely launch the drug, and thankfully the right path forward prevailed. With all the stress of COVID, we knew that patients with migraine, they needed a new treatment now more than ever, right? Stress brings on migraines, and the last thing you need if you have a migraine is to be disabled for 2 days and not take care of a family member or friend or have to go to the emergency room packed with COVID. So no, we were not going to delay the launch. We decided again to seek opportunity in catastrophe. During the craziness of the COVID-19 and the shutting down that was occurring, we showed our true colors. How we performed during the pandemic was really a microcosm of the entrepreneurial spirit. And our employees rallied around helping migraine patients during this difficult time. We ripped up our old pre-COVID launch plans, and we had a new plan. We pivoted to what we dubbed the modern-day pharma launch. And you know what? It was much needed because the pharma drug launches have not been modernized. So we had a sales force about half the size of AbbVie, but really COVID handicapped the effect of that sales force. We decided to heavily focus on a new strategy. We also called it the digital-first strategy. We use social media, digital streaming platforms, online pharmacies to directly reach patients. We even use Zoom to interact with doctors remotely and FedEx to deliver samples to doctors' offices. We were agile and quicker in our response and to adapt to COVID. And looking back, right now, we all say it made perfect sense. Who knew that we'd be locked up and isolated for so long? And everyone was isolated at home on their devices. So our digital-first strategy was the right one and took off. So as fortune would have it, we got a little help from the Kardashians. So Chloe, interestingly, had bad migraines since age 13 and was debilitated from it intermittently throughout her life. She found relief in Nurtec. She wanted to help us. She heard about our digital-first strategy, and she was the perfect spokesperson. She, too, was turning misfortune into opportunity. She has 125 million followers, and she helped educate millions of people about Nurtec ODT. Think about that. You have that many followers, and when she tweeted about her response, we had 1 million hits on our website. So thanks to Chloe, we were able to quickly penetrate the market and get our message out about Nurtec. As entrepreneurs, the degree of your success will ultimately depend on how good your product is and if you solve an important problem. I could talk about our marketing of Nurtec ODT, the head-to-head battles with AbbVie, and all the challenges of COVID for hours, but I'll give you the spoiler so we can wrap up. Nurtec became the leading migraine therapy, and we beat AbbVie for the #1 position. Over 50,000 new patients start Nurtec every single week. There's 40 million Americans who suffer from migraine. The drug's on a run rate, not only successful with patients from a business perspective, it's already at over $1 billion in net revenue per year. But most importantly, our drug has been a paradigm shift. Normally, a migraine puts you down for 2 days. Nurtec ODT gets you back to normal functioning within 1 hour, so you can get back to your life. There's no better way for me to capture this than to tell you about another patient story in the words of this North Carolina individual, Greg Peterman. Greg Peterman is an American hero. He served 7 tours of duty in the Middle East. He had mild concussion from his service, severe migraine post-concussion, was disabled, depressed, and suicidal from the pain. Nothing had helped him. He responded to his first treatment in Nurtec, and he got his life back. Greg has agreed to be a spokesman as well, and you've probably seen him on some of our commercials, and help educating people who have TBI and migraine post-TBI that there's a new solution for that. So there's a saying on Wall Street that good businesses are bought, they're not sold. We never put Biohaven up for sale, but with the impact that Nurtec ODT had and the success of Biohaven, you can imagine we had several suitors coming after us. We beat AbbVie, and recognizing our market leadership and superior product, the call came one night from Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. In October of 2022, we sold a part of our company for $13 billion in total considerations. From this short talk, I hope you have a sense of our team's journey and what we overcame. The goal wasn't to get a big exit and retire on an island. The mission was to help people suffering from disable illnesses, and along the way, as entrepreneurs, we built a good business. Notice in describing Pfizer's acquisition, I said part of our company was sold. In fact, our deal with Pfizer, we arranged it so that the migraine assets and the sales force went over to Pfizer, but we were able to retain that amazing neuroscience team that we have and the rest of the drugs in our pipeline so that we can bring forward new treatments for other brain disorders. October 3rd, we sold migraine and the assets and Biohaven to Pfizer. But then the very next day, October 4th, we started Biohaven 2.0 as a new public company, and we're back to our smaller company roots with a fraction of the number of employees, all the risk back again on our shoulders, a low share price, but the same passionate mission and optimism that we can win for patients again. So in starting a new company from a larger successful one, we are not alone. Other entrepreneurs have done this when you look back. In 1985, Steve Jobs left Apple and started Next. You probably don't remember Next, but Next actually developed the Mac operating system that we all use. Even Walt Disney yearned for a risky new adventure when Disney got too big in corporate. He formed a company, a very small company called WED, that became a successful theme park that then supported the rest of the company. So entrepreneurs never stop innovating. Remember, entrepreneurs are hardwired to see the opportunity to innovate and solve problems. So in summary, what are a few lessons from my journey that I'd like to leave you with today? Number 1, be optimistic. Optimism is critical. Winston Churchill once was quoted as saying, "The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." None of our Biohaven successes came easily. All of our moves required hard work and flirted with catastrophe all the way throughout the journey. You have to see the opportunity where only others see disaster. A philosophy of optimism was instilled in me at birth since my parents had immigrated here and escaped communism. They came here with no money, no support system. Whatever your background, you can instill optimism in yourself. Optimism is a habit that can be trained, for example, here at Wake Forest. Number 2, take risks. You have to always keep yourself exposed to risk. Get uncomfortable. But when you take a risk, make sure you always have a sound strategy. Don't only have one backup plan, have two backup plans. The definition of innovation is finding ways to solve problems and winning despite all the risks. Fortune favors the bold and the well-prepared. Number 3, invest in yourself. You have to develop new skills and redefine yourself as you grow. Become an expert in everything that's required to make your business a success. In any venture, remember, everything is your responsibility, and you have to learn every aspect of your business. Do not delegate that to anyone else. Number 4, innovate as you go. Our innovation wasn't just scientific. We innovated throughout our business: social media, digital media, marketing, and sales. Challenge the status quo, and always question conventional wisdom to find new paths forward. Number 5, it's all about the team. Build a high-performing team. Biohaven never would have worked without top people. I was lucky to get them and fought to keep them. Hire good people, in fact, the best. Build a team culture. Drug development, like so many other ventures, is a team sport. You have to maintain flat structures to keep the innovation, work together, ignore titles, empower your high performers, and share your success with every employee. 150 Biohaven employees became millionaires with this transaction. Lastly, I want you to always remember, be alert. Look for opportunity whenever catastrophe strikes. So I'd like to thank you, my fellow entrepreneurs, for your time. After all, most of you have come to Wake Forest not because you seek safety. You are attending Entrepalooza because a part of you wants to be an entrepreneur too. You are fitting yourself out to be an entrepreneur, fitting out your own ship, and that's awesome. As you embark on your next adventure, I want you to think of that old saying and the wisdom in it. A ship is safe in a harbor, but a harbor is not what a ship is for. Good luck and go get 'em. Okay. That's amazing. Thank you.
If that talk doesn't get you inspired, I think I'd go get a checkup. Oh my goodness. That story to me is like the pharma version of Rocky. What an amazing, inspirational story. Vlad, we are so proud to call you an alum and a supporter of our entrepreneurship program. On behalf of our entire advisory council and on Wake Forest University as a whole, please accept this gift for your tremendous talk. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.